Good evening, folks. Welcome back to another Monday night live stream. Hope everybody's well. Hope your weekend was fabulous. And I hope you're all safe at home. And hopefully it's a little bit warmer than it is here. If you're down south in England, there's been some particularly bad snow, I believe. So I hope everybody's kind of just staying home and wrapped up warm. It is blowing freezing here. If I could have found my woolly hat, I'd have had my woolly hat on tonight. But never mind. We crack on. I've got my little heater here. I haven't been in the studio since, what day was I in here? I was in here Thursday when I filmed my interview with Tom from Goblin King Games, and I've been working inside the house the rest of the week. So yes, it's a bit chilly in here. I haven't had a chance to warm the place up, shall we say. So let's have a look in the chat, see who we've got, and see what we can expect tonight. So Super Bunker Man was in nice and early. Good afternoon to you, mate. Smudge, good evening to you. Hope you're well. Type 40 Taurus, good afternoon as well. Christian Reeves, happy belated birthday, mate. Hope you had a fantastic birthday at the weekend as well. I know it was your birthday last week, but I'm sure you did something at the weekend. We've got Tasty Brain Drain saying hello as well. Colin Mack, good evening to you, mate, as well. Camo, good morning, sir. How you doing? Blizzards, hello as well. Clyde Dashing, hello, fella. He says, what day is it even? More coffee. More coffee is definitely needed. I've just had a cup of coffee. I've just finished it. I now don't have a hot drink. I now have a bottle of water. It'd be nice to have something warm, but we'll stick with water. We got Major Tom, good evening, Ed. How the devil are you, my friend? Colin Max's Kings of War Game of the Year every year. We are talking about Game of the Year. I'm going to give you my top 5 games of 2022. And I kind of do this on an annual basis now. I think it's a nice way to kind of round the year out, or just before Christmas. It's nice to kind of have a little look back over the year, the games I've played, what I would say my top 5 games this year are, what my game of the year will be. And then also have a little look forward into 2023, into the year coming, and what kind of stuff's interesting me, what do I think's going to be kind of on my priorities for next year on a hobby perspective anyway. But Kings of War is your game, Colin. Let's see if it makes my list. Skulldoggery, good evening to you as well. How are you doing? Jez Hunt, cold in it. He says, Jez, it's absolutely freezing. I also need to message you back, mate, and we need to get that cup of coffee. I was going to say a pint, but it's a bit chilly now. We should stick to a cup of coffee, mate, shouldn't we? But I'm terrible. Please send me a message, mate. Give me a nudge, because I am terrible at remembering to do stuff. Where's he at? Colin, oh, sorry. I jumped ahead a little bit there. Skulldoggery saying got here just in time. Zingbo saying he missed the last couple of live streams, but he's looking forward to hearing Andy's pick for games of the year tonight. I have a couple of kind of, hello Zingbo by the way, I have a couple of kind of caveats which I'll come on to about what qualifies for my list of the year kind of thing, because obviously it's like, you know, like normally when you do these kind of things, it's like games that were released this year. I don't kind of do mine like that, but we'll come on to the caveats in a bit. Paul, is it? I want to say Ridgen, but is it Ridgen? I don't want to kind of mispronounce it, mate. But hello, Paul. How are you doing? Colin's saying it's -7 here in the west of Scotland. It was -3 here when I went to pick the little one up from school. There's not much snow. There's quite a bit of frost, but there's not much snow or anything like that. But it is blooming cold, that's for sure. Jess says the winter is a time of endless hats for us baldies. You're not wrong. I've even left my hair a bit longer. I haven't even shaved my head this week. I normally shave it every kind of like 3 or 4 days, something like that. But I've kind of left it a little bit this week. Just so you get a little bit more around the back. So when I've got my hat on, at least I've got something kind of protecting my neck. Tasty Brain Drain saying it's warm here, currently 72 degrees Fahrenheit. What a bliss, mate. Ed says we had a couple of mil of snow and predictably everyone panicked. It's like I say, mate, it's been kind of a bit frosty. It's not very nice kind of walking about and stuff. It's obviously really slippy, but we had a little bit of kind of dusting of snow on Sunday, and the little one loved it, went outside, started throwing snowballs around, which was quite nice. But yeah, it's more just the cold, mate. It's absolutely freezing. Hello Clyde, how you doing, mate? Joachim, good evening to you. I shouldn't be whinging about snow. Joachim over in Sweden normally has about 10 foot of snow, so but you guys kind of know how to deal with it. That's the difference. Where are we up to here? That suddenly skipped ahead massively there where I did that one. Excuse me. Christian saying thanks. It was a good one. Board Game Cafe on Saturday and then D&D on Sunday. It sounds like you had a lovely birthday, mate. Sunderland says, evening, freezing here too. We'll probably get to -10 tonight. Yeah, that is chilly, mate. Super Punky Man saying, be kind and drop a like. How are we doing on likes? We have 60 people watching and only 16 likes. You folks need to know how to press that like button. That would very much help. Thank you very much. Phil Campbell, good evening to you. How are you doing? We've got Luke Pryor says, what's up? How we're all doing? Nice to see you, Luke. Alex Berry, good evening, Alex. How are you doing, mate? He says he's looking forward to what you all think is Game of the Year. Yeah, I mean, one thing I will say, and I'll kind of comment on this later on as well, is it might not be your Game of the Year. Like this is not like a universal vote around the kind of community. This is just my thoughts. But it'll be interesting after I've kind of gone through my list, the kind of stuff that's on your list, the kind of stuff that maybe you haven't played yet, but you're tempted to kind of have a look at for next year. So we'll kind of get into that stuff later on as well. So I'm interested to know the kind of stuff that you think. Northern Realms says, oi oi Savaloy, how you doing, mate? Jess says, Game of the Year is, guess who's the British Prime Minister this week? I like that, mate. Yoakum says, another 40 centimetres or 16 inches of snow is expected to fall here in the next days. That's kind of bad, mate. We're lucky if we've got about 1 millimetre. And most of that's ice, I think. Scott Latham, hello to you, mate. How you doing, Scotty? Luke says it never got above -1 down here in Norfolk. 20 miles south in Cambridge, they had a load of snow. I saw there was quite a bit of like there's been some kind of like airport chaos as there always is in the UK as soon as we get a little bit of snow and stuff like that. But yeah, I think it's mainly kind of obviously Scotland always gets it, but I think it's a lot more down south this week. Andy Smith, hello mate, how you doing? He says he's not at work this week, having a nice little kind of feet up, mate, just enjoying yourself there. Tyrion, good evening. It's fucking cold. It definitely is as well. Bobby Clark, how you doing, sir? He says he's just finished another Malifaux model and looking forward to his first Christmas dinner tomorrow. Your Malifaux models are looking absolutely fantastic, mate. I was just checking them out on Instagram this week. And I haven't had a Christmas. I think the only Christmas dinner I'll get will be my Christmas dinner, my Christmas Day dinner. Like it's one of those things, you know, like when you're working like in an office or something like that, and you're having the office party, and you have like you might go out with your team, and then you go out like for the whole kind of the office Christmas party type thing, and you end up with Christmas dinners all over the place. Not like that when you work on your own at home. I was saying to my wife, I said, I think I might have my own Christmas party, just like take myself out and give myself an award for Employee of the Year as well while I'm on, and buy myself a Christmas gift. Just to see how else up you do it. He was back down in Bristol last week, but loads to make from home now. Still about for a couple though, definitely, mate. Let's sort it out. Greg Cherry, hello to you. He says, Oathsworn, hands down Game of the Year. Wait till the Board Game Awards. I've heard lots of good things about Oathsworn, to be fair, mate. I don't know anything about it, if I'm perfectly honest, but I have heard lots of good things. Busey says, I bet that couple of mil on the head kept you a touch warm at least. It's amazing the difference. It kind of like, it's just enough to kind of like trap a little bit of heat and stop the breeze on the old ball patch. Clyde says he's going to use this list as a shopping list if I don't own it. Well, we'll have to see if that's the case, mate. Super Punky Man says it's 68 degrees, but starting tomorrow it's going to drop with chases of snow. Wow. It's getting everywhere then, isn't it? Luke says Game of the Year for me would be the year I discovered it. Yeah, there's an element of that, mate. It doesn't matter how kind of old the game is. If it's new to you, it's new to you, isn't it? But like I say, I've got a couple of caveats about what can possibly make the list and what can't make the list, if you like. Those are my caveats, and then I'll come and tell you kind of what's on my list this year. Eddie Har, hello to you, mate. He says Relic Blade. Relic Blade is not a game I've managed to play, mate. It's not, or it certainly wasn't widely available in the UK for quite some time. I think it's starting to maybe kind of pick up a little bit of distribution here, but it's not the kind of thing you would stumble across in a kind of gaming store or something like that. John F, he says half a centimetre of snow is London shut down. Pretty much what happens in it. Oliver, good evening to you, mate. How are you doing? Luke says enough snow to make a footprint and we lose our mind. Where I live is kind of like there's a very slight little, as you come into my little kind of cul-de-sac, there's a very slight little sort of decline. It is a decline. Is it an incline goes up? Yeah, a decline. There's an incline from my door, put it that way. So it's if you kind of walking down and it's a bit icy, it's not very nice. I'll be perfectly honest. A mate of mine came to kind of collect some bits of terrain. He was looking to buy some terrain, and a while ago I bought some off him, and I've not used it. So I said, "Do you want?" He said he was looking to buy some terrain. I went, "You can buy back what you sold me if you want." So he came to pick it up the other night, and he ended up pulling the car further down rather than just walking down from the top, because it was a bit icy, that's for sure. James Bray, how you doing, mate? Nice to see you in, sir. Andy Smith says Andy Smith says, yeah, he sat with Kath. Nice tea, few beers. That's the way to do it, mate. Anna, hello to you as well. Nice to see you in the chat tonight. Eddie says he's in Louisiana. We don't know what snow is, but we know what alligators and poisonous snakes are. I think I would take the snow, mate. The snow I can do something about. I can choose to wrap up warm. I can choose to stop in the house. Alligators and poisonous snakes, I think I'd kind of will give a miss to. We get a little bit annoyed if we get some flies in the summer, and we had quite a lot of bees this year, and they get a bit frustrating. But yeah, that's about as bad as it gets. John F says he's just had more Firefight minis delivered. A nice one, mate. Which ones have you decided to go for? Luke says, yeah, no staff Christmas party for me either. I don't know what a Polish Christmas dinner would look like if I went to their offices. I don't think I really know kind of what different sort of like nationalities and have for Christmas lunch. I mean, like, it is like the kind of the turkey dinner. Is it universal when it comes to kind of Christmas? And it's a Christian celebration, isn't it? I suppose so. So when it comes to sort of Christian countries, I don't know. I know it's like Thanksgiving dinner in America is turkey as well, is it? Do you guys over in the States, do you kind of have like a special Christmas dinner? I've been to like Florida at Christmas time, and I remember it's kind of different. You're around Disney and stuff like that. Like Disneyland's still open, or Disney World, I should say, is still open on Christmas Day. So it didn't really feel like Christmas Day the same way. But I know kind of for you lot that like Thanksgiving's the big celebration. Where was this? I'll skip it around. Let me find this again. Here we go. Jim says, how did our office do at the end of last week? It was super spreader event. All the bugs going round. That's the thing when you don't see anybody anymore, isn't it? Colin Wakeland says, good evening to everybody. Camo said he bought the Vehement starter box. It's huge. It is quite big, mate. I've actually got it over there as well, untouched. Paul Taylor says, evening all. Hope you're all warm and good. I'm warming up, mate. I'll say I'm warming up. Good morning, Moose. How you doing, mate? Nice to see you. Ed says, so you know I'm holding you personally responsible for the fact that I have yet another 1987 Rogue Trader Mini on my desk right now. Why is it my fault? I didn't make you buy that, did I? Or is this for the December painting challenge? Is that what it's for? Zingbo says, last year's list introduced me to Moonstone, and I think I ordered my first kits the same night as your awards live stream. Well, I take no responsibility for anybody spending cash tonight. Oliver says, we have 3 centimeters of snow in Germany. I pulled my daughters to kindergarten in a sled. I'm sure they love that. My little boy's got he's just been getting a sledge as well, or sledge. We call him a sledge over here. I guess it's really a sled. So we're hoping to kind of get enough snow he can get out and play in it. Luke says the only slopes we have around East Anglia are in multi-story car parks. Yeah, I mean, it's not a very steep slope, but it's kind of one of those where it's just enough that it kind of like that. We'll put it this way: when I had a rear-wheel drive car, I used to struggle getting it out when it was wintry. That was for sure. Phil says you can't throw salt on an alligator and hope it melts. You can. It just doesn't. That's the difference. RG, good evening. Says he finally decided on the basis for his Rashard gang last week, and he's finishing off the rest of the gang and starting the guild gang. A little bit of Carnivale on the go there. Jess says snow is better because snowball to the head's better than a gator's ball to the head. I would agree with that, mate. Type 40 TARDIS is waiting for the next big batch of Rumble Slam releases. Very nice, mate. And he's going to jump on them over the winter break. Tony Howell says, Cooey, hello, Chucks. Hey, old Chuck, how you doing? Nice to see you in. Tom says, Polish Christmas dinner is mostly fish and, is it pierogi? Is that right? Or pierogi? I don't know what that is, mate. Luke says, yeah, most of Europe is often more about Christmas Eve than Christmas Day. Yeah, we briefly mentioned something about that last week. People kind of exchanging gifts on Christmas Eve. RG saying, almost got the December challenge done. A nice dragon. Top looks good. Underneath, less so. I tell you what, mate, just make sure you take your photograph from above. That's all that needs to happen. Robbie Last, good day from Australia, everyone. He says, hello, Robbie. How are you doing? Super Pumpkin Man says he has ham on Christmas Eve and brisket on Christmas Day. Very nice. Andy says, cats play with my snake. I'm guessing one of you has had beers. Northern Realms, he says, got to be Conquest for my game of the year. Phenomenal. I don't think you're alone in that, mate. I've not played Conquest yet. I'm about to, at some point in the very near future, sort of take part in a demo, or at least see a demo played with the guys from a local gaming group. So I will get round to seeing it. I have had a demo a long time ago, but I'm going back like about 4 years ago now, and I'm sure the game's a little bit different to when I demoed it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it, but I've not kind of I wouldn't say I've not played it to kind of have an opinion on it yet. Zingbo says, what was the December painting challenge? I missed the live stream for it. So the December painting challenge is the gift of Christmas. It is December, it is Christmas coming up, and so the theme is basically, think about like the gift. No, it's not the gift of Christmas, it's the, what was it? It was the, oh man, the gift was November. It was Christmas wishes. That was what it was. Christmas wishes. And it was stuff there where basically kind of like something you wish you'd painted this year but you haven't done yet. That kind of, that box set that you wish maybe you hadn't bought but it's still there, so you're going to do something about it. Or that model that you wish you'd painted when you were younger, maybe you decided to go and kind of pick something up. Or that model that you wished you'd bought this year but you hadn't yet, so maybe you've went out and got it. That kind of stuff. And then if there's nothing that really fits that, or you're already kind of wanting to paint something for the end of the year, it's kind of open. Paint whatever you want really on top of that one. But that's the kind of the theme for this one. Tony Boovleiden, hello mate, how you doing? He says, great Moonstone video, hope it's on the list. Just signed up to a Moonstone campaign at our shop, looking forward to getting regular games. Thank you very much, mate. If anyone hasn't seen the interview I did with Tom Greenway from Goblin King Games, the makers of Moonstone, please do check it out. It's getting some really nice comments. Folks seem to be really enjoying it, but it's not getting a huge amount of views. I guess it's, if you do it about a game that not many people maybe know about or not many people play, unfortunately it's not going to get many views. But then that's the whole point of this kind of channel, bringing the kind of a bit of information to something that you don't know about. Even if you do know about it, I mean, the interview, the chat I had with Tom was really interesting. We kind of chatted about how Tom got into game design, where Goblin King Games come from. We had a little bit of chat about kind of our opinions on some kinds of game design, about where Moonstone come from, about how it wouldn't exist without something that we chatted about. And it was just a nice kind of like, it's the kind of thing you can just pop it on in the background, listen to it like a podcast while you're sitting painting or driving the car or something like that. Nice little kind of bit of background. So yeah, please check it out. I would appreciate it. Tizzy Brain Drain saying, yeah, many people in the States usually have a big Christmas dinner with family and friends. So it's kind of a little bit like Thanksgiving as well. James said he's cooking the Christmas meal for 9 this year, down with turkey. I do 2 big chickens instead of a frankly embarrassing number of pigs in blankets. I think we tend to do like, I don't even think we really bother much with turkey. I mean, let's be honest, turkey's not the nicest of meat, to be fair, is it? We tend to do like beef or something like that, I think, yeah. Yeah, Northern Realm says with me. Yes, exactly, mate, with you. Type 40 daughter says, I'm working Christmas Day, so having Christmas with the in-laws on the 23rd. That's the way to do it, mate. Like, just make it work for you. Make it work. I'm just coming down here. Elliot Lancaster says, box sets I wish I had not bought. Curse City. That makes 2 of us, mate. I wasn't overly enamoured with it either. Some nice miniatures in there, but yeah, that's as far as it went. Camo says, I won the wooden spoon at a Conquest tournament I went to a few months ago. Did you enjoy it, mate? That's the most important thing. Jess says, great video. Thank you very much. Luke says, hasn't watched the Moonstone one yet, but I'll stick it on between meetings tomorrow. Nice one. Luke says, Moonstone's a great game. I really want to get some minis for it. To be honest, mate, it's one of those games that, like, Do we want to talk about it later? I'll talk a little bit about it now. It's one of those games where, as I said in the interview, it kind of ticks a lot of boxes for me. Like, I'm not somebody that designs games. I'm not a person that tinkers with rules and stuff. But there's a lot of things in Moonstone that are like would be my wish list if I was kind of designing a game. Like I love having the stat cards in front of me. I quite like the fact that there's not like dice. It's cards to play the game and stuff like that. I like the fact it doesn't need a lot of miniatures. I like the fact that list building is super easy. You kind of just take the miniatures. You're like, there's no points costs to the miniatures. So there's a lot of things to love about Moonstone. Northern Realms is saying the video made me want to buy Moonstone. I'm sure I might just be the person to be able to give you a game, mate. Anna says, I think the Moonstone video might get more views if he titled it more about his experience of making his own game. People always dream of doing that. To be honest, I was thinking of sort of redoing it this week. It's one of those things where if you put like designer interview, they get buried. Nobody will kind of watch it, kind of thing. So you have to put something in there to kind of intrigue people into clicking a little bit. And to be fair, the Moonstone logo isn't particularly kind of bright either to stand out on a thumbnail either. So I've been thinking, I think I'll kind of maybe play with the title a little bit this week and kind of redo the thumbnail a little bit. It's not something I do very often. I know kind of the big YouTubers do. If something's not doing particularly well, they'll play with the thumbnail and play with the title. I tend to just use that time to move on and do my next video and not worry too much really and just try and learn from it. But with this one, I think it kind of deserves it. Alex says, with Daryl on this, Conquest is his personal favourite and made even better by the banter from the lads. It's quite interesting seeing the chat that you lot have. I'm not somebody that's on kind of message boards a lot, kind of sort of getting involved in the chat and stuff like that. But I do kind of lurk and I'll sit and kind of read and have a look and see what's going on and stuff, and it is quite interesting watching you lot chatting about it. Smudge saying, really enjoyed the Moonstone video, thank you very much. Blizzard saying, I don't bother with turkey, usually make chicken dumplings for Christmas dinner. Northern Realm says, Andy, an interesting bit of local history, meat for Christmas dinner used to be too expensive for most, so lobster dinners were very common in the fishing villages and towns around here. We've quite often had like some salmon or something like that. And I wonder if that kind of comes from that kind of stuff, or if it's just like a bit of like a family tradition type thing. But yet we've kind of had turkey sometimes, but we generally kind of have like meat and fish or something like that. But I'd not heard that, mate. I do remember hearing that like lobster used to be almost like poor person's food, and that somehow over the years that changed, and all of a sudden lobster became expensive. Where are we up to here? Spoonie, good evening to you, mate. Snowball says, you won't get this in Warhammer. Sadly, those are the kind of things that work. Andrew Fairbanks says, did my budget for the last 2 years spend 20k out of 154 spent over that period? A new computer and any of those games that include too. Have I missed something, mate, in that conversation? I'm not sure what that's about, mate. Tony Owl says, I already called it Tiddlywinks for the #1 slot. Yes, Tiddlywinks is taking the title. That's it, mate. You've just blown the lid off it there now. That's exactly what it is. So I think what we'll do, let me just make sure I'm pressing the right buttons. And he says, we're having curry for Christmas. Somebody I know goes to an Indian restaurant for their Christmas lunch as well, and it sounds fantastic. And it says, Boxing Day is a big day for him. It says, what about Dad's birthday? Love this food channel. Have we mentioned games yet? We're about to get on the games, mate. I promise you. So, yes, what I'll do is we'll flicker across to here. I'll just get my laptop down off the top of the screen there, so we're not getting it in the corner there. And where are we? Yeah, Clyde saying, I would love a curry for Christmas. I've never been out for Christmas dinner before. You know, like when you go to a restaurant, I've always had it like at home and stuff like that. But yeah, there was some friends of mine and their family, they go to like a local Indian restaurant and have like a curry for Christmas dinner. And I think it's just because like there's like somebody's a vegetarian, so they don't like the meat, and somebody else doesn't really like Christmas dinners. So over the time, that's become their family tradition, which I quite like. And Andrew's saying, yeah, lobster used to be fed to prisoners on the east coast of the US. When trains started going across the coast, they served it as a delicacy. There you go. Yeah, Ed's saying apparently in Japan they have KFC. I've heard that before as well, mate. Yeah. And Spoonie saying, yeah, true on the curry. I've never heard many people going for a turkey dinner. Yeah, people go for curries each month. Yeah. RPD saying, hoping Snap was the #1 game. You never know, mate, do you? So yes, so we'll get onto the games of the year now. We'll get on the games of 2022. But I'll probably going to clip this out and edit it together, and I'll put some images in and some nice kind of graphics and stuff like that for the clips video, because last year I got somebody complaining, 2 hours for a best of thing. I'm not watching that. And it's like, you do realise this was a live stream, don't you? Anyway, tonight I'm going to take you through my top 5 games of 2022 and tell you what my game of the year was. Now, I do have a couple of caveats when it comes to this. So the games that are eligible, shall we say, for 2022, it's not games that came out in 2022. It's not like games that were new this year. The list that I kind of come up with are basically, they have to fit 2 criteria. The first criteria is I have to have played them this year. And it doesn't matter if I've played the game previously. It doesn't matter if I've played it last year and played it the year before. It doesn't matter whether the game's new, whether the game's old, but I have to have played it this year. There's no point me saying, oh, well, I really love, let's say, The Walking Dead. I really love The Walking Dead. It's fantastic. It's my game of the year. And it's like, well, yeah, but I haven't played it for like 18 months or something like that. So game of the year and top 5 games. #1 criteria, I have to have played them this year. The second criteria is I also take into account how they've been supported this year by the company as well, and whether there's been kind of new releases for the game, whether the company's actively sort of supporting it. Is it a game that you can go out and purchase? Because if, for example, it's this really obscure game that's been out of print for 5 years and you can't pick it up, it doesn't qualify for Game of the Year. So other people will have their own opinions. Other people might say it has to be a new game this year that you've never played before. Other people will say it has to be a game that came out this year. These are my awards. So those are the only 2 caveats. Have to have played it this year, and it has to be supported, and it has to have kind of had some releases this year. So we'll start with, in fact, before we start, if you kind of watch till the end of the top 5, I'm going to give you a couple of honourable mentions and explain why they didn't make the list, but why they nearly did. So at number 5 of my top 5 this year is Godtear by Steamforged Games. Now, most of you will remember I was involved in the Creator Clash this year, which I went on to win, which was fantastic. And Godtear is a game that's not new to me this year. I've played it previously. And in fact, I almost went, I think I kind of said it might have been my game of 2020, I think. But this year I played it a bit more again. And this year, I think this is the first time I really played it to any kind of serious level, if you like competitive wise. And it really it definitely ticked a lot of boxes for me this year. The miniatures are great. I'm a big fan of the miniatures. I love the fact they all come pre-built and sort of in single piece, and you haven't got to worry about building them as well. Everybody, I guess, sort of familiar with my channel will know that building models is the bit I enjoy the least. So that's definitely one sort of added bonus for me, is the fact that the models come already built. I like the way it's kind of sold, where it's just individual packs where you just basically buy the champion and the followers. And I like the fact that there's no list building involved. You just pick the champions that you like the look of. And the way we played it for the Creator Clash was you could take 4 champions and their followers, and then you picked 3 from that sort of pool of 4 to take part in your games. And playing in a kind of a competitive environment or a more organized play environment really did it brought it all back to why I really enjoy that game. It's a massive shame that it's not sort of more popular. It's a massive shame that it doesn't seem to be played more often by folks. There is the odd tournament dotting about here and there, and if you're a fan of the game, I definitely recommend joining the Discord. There's a Godtear Discord group, and they're really, really active. They seem to be the folks that organise a lot of the tournaments. There's a lot of online tournaments for Tabletop Simulator if you're into that as well. And Steamforged, whilst they do kind of have a release roughly every quarter of a new champion. The latest one was Lily not too long ago. They're relatively quiet about the game, and it seems like Steamforged are much more sort of involved these days in their board game stuff. So things like Elden Ring and Bard Song, the Epic Encounters D&D stuff, they definitely seem to be much more involved in that stuff, and they don't really show the love to Godtear so much. They obviously did the Creator Clash back in the summer, and I thought that was going to be the start of them kind of trying to be a bit of a push with it, but that's pretty much the last thing that's the last thing they ever mentioned about it, and it's never really been mentioned again. They've not spoken to me about it anymore, for example, and I was the one that won the Creator Clash. So it's a bit of a shame that it doesn't get kind of championed a little bit more by Steamforged, but it is a game that's supported. It's a game that's fantastic. And I kind of urge anybody to really to give it a try. You can normally pick up the starter boxes relatively cheap now, but I would urge you, if you are interested, in trying it with 3 champions against your opponent's 3 champions, because the game is hugely different to just playing kind of 1 champion versus 1 champion, which you get in a starter box. So I would definitely recommend trying to get a demo of it somewhere. Sort of, if you know somebody that owns the game, try it out. It's a really, really tactical game. Rules are super simple, but lots and lots of depth and really, really interesting. So yes, that is my number 5, is Godtear by Steamforged Games. So I'll be editing this back for tomorrow's kind of clips video anyway, but I'll have a little look in here and see what folks are saying and stuff. And James is saying, speaking of Snap, I'm hooked on Marvel's Snap. I played it for a little bit, mate, but I got a bit bored of it quite quickly. Camo says 25. I don't think I said top 25, did I? I'm sure I pretty much just said top 5. Yeah, I was going to say. Andrew Fairbanks is saying, I'm guessing Horus Heresy isn't on the list. I've never played Horus Heresy, mate, so it couldn't make the list. There you go. Yes, we'll just say normally turkey curry after that. Yeah, there is that as well. Christian sharing the link there as well for the Patreon. Thank you very much, mate. Patreon is what keeps me being able to keep doing this, and it allows me to keep talking about the games that might not be the most popular. If you do enjoy stuff that's maybe a little less mainstream, then supporting the channel is the way to make sure that I can keep talking about that kind of stuff. Otherwise, I'm relying upon ad revenue and sponsorships, and that's something very different. Smudge says, oh yeah, talking about curry stuff. James says, one of the Godtear starters is £22 on Amazon. Honestly, mate, it's an absolute bargain. It's worth picking up both of the starter sets and playing 2 champions versus 2 champions is a good way to experience it. But once you get your head around, by all means, kind of play 1 against 1 just to get the basic rules down. But to really understand why the game is so good, you have to play it 3 versus 3. That's when the synergies all come together. It's where there's enough stuff on the board that things start getting in each other's way, and it's about the placement of stuff. It's about where when you're putting a banner down and then kind of moving to attack an enemy, another champion's coming in and crushing the banners, and you've got to try and protect it. A lot of the stuff you can do in the game only really comes to the surface once you start playing with enough stuff on the board. And I know a lot of folks even just like sort of try it 1 versus 1 and go, it's all right, like it's not really my kind of thing. That's not the game, really. I almost wish that starter boxes didn't come with 1 versus 1, because I think there's a lot of people that's as much as they've tried and they're not played anymore. Let's have a little look here. Blizzard's are saying Godtear is great. Starters are both under $36 on Amazon. Yeah. Spoonie's building up some Horus Heresy. No worry, hiya VG, mate. Hope you're okay. Don't worry about, mate. Family stuff's family stuff. Paul says, I'd never get attached to a Steamforged game again for fear of them dumping it like Guild Ball. If I'm honest, mate, people kind of need to move on from that. There's a lot of... I did a live stream about it and a video about it a while ago when it first happened. And there's a lot of reasons why it happened. Like, they're not the only company that decides to kind of move on from a game. And they didn't just kind of dump it. I mean, at the end of the day, it still exists. The miniatures are still there. The rules are still there if you want them. And Godtear is very similar in terms of, like, if they suddenly just said, well, we're not making any more champions for it, like, is there like 20 odd champions already, 26 champions or something like that? It's not like there's not enough to kind of continue playing the game. So yeah, you can be bitter about it and stuff, but for me, it's kind of time to move on. Northern Realm saying Godtear is something I was really keen on. was, mate? Have you tried it and didn't like it, or just you not had a chance to try it yet? Paul says, are you getting to design the mini for winning the Godtear event? It's never been spoken about again, mate. They've not mentioned it to me anymore, mate. So I don't know whether it was one of them things where they changed their mind or whether they've just forgotten about it, but it was never ever spoken about again, mate. Andrew says, Godtear got shafted because of how Guild Ball ended. I don't think that's the case, mate. I don't think that Godtear got shafted because of it or anything like that. Godtear is basically... Godtear got shafted because it came out right as kind of lockdown was hitting, really. It came out sort of right in 2020. So in what would have been a game that would have went and been very much kind of organised player, like nobody played any games kind of like organised player-wise for a couple of years. So I thought this summer with the Creator Clash was the start of them kind of rejuvenating it and stuff like that. And it's just a shame, like for whatever reason Steamforged are interested in other stuff. They're still releasing stuff for it. It's still a great game. I just kind of I wish it was a bit more popular, that's all. Smudge is saying, yeah, they've dropped even more then, cost £27. He says, I've heard before that Moonstone video isn't getting many views. Sorry, boy, I have to say it's the first BlackJack Legacy video I've not watched in a while due to months of being fed Moonstone during the Kickstarter. Are we talking about the same thing, mate? There hasn't been a Moonstone Kickstarter for ages. Are you not kind of getting your wires crossed with a different game? Because I've not heard any Moonstone stuff like forever. Maybe I'm kind of missing. Maybe I'm missing the point, but it must have been a different one, mate. Where are we up to here? Type 40 says, I'm still looking for a US distributor for Burrs and Badgers. Yeah, it's a tiny little company, mate. There's like 2 people work for that company. It's I think they do all right out of like sort of European stuff, I think, really, to be fair. Paul says, just checked. The Eternal Glade starter is only £22 for 12 minis. That sounds like a good deal. It is 12 minis, but it's just like it's only 2 champions, really. That's the thing. 2 champions with their followers. So if you're buying it for the minis, then fair enough. But then the problem is when people buy it for the minis, and this is where people go, oh well, like I can't use the minis in other stuff. The minis are intentionally different sizes. The followers are one size, and the champions are obviously big because they've been powered with the God tiers. But it's a game mechanic, really, to make them stand out. But folks are kind of like, oh, well, I can't use them because the scale's all over. Like, they're the right size for the game kind of thing. Yeah, VJ saying retiring a game because it came to a natural conclusion and dumping a game are 2 different things. Yeah, definitely, mate. Andrew saying it's time to move on. Please tell my exes. Verathon says most war gamers have never heard about Guild Ball. Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things. I think at some point it might potentially come back in one guise or another. But it was the right time for it to. I think it was one of those things, and I've seen other games. I think War Machine is going to end up in a very, very similar position, to be fair. Ed says the problem with Godtear is 1v1 is bad and 3v3 is expensive. Oh, it's not expensive, mate. Not in this. I wouldn't say it was expensive. Like those like, units are like less than 20 quid each. Like they're not a fortune. I've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 8. I've got 20 different champions. Like they're not a fortune, mate. There are a lot of games that are a lot more expensive than that. Clyde says, never heard of Godtear, Guild Ball, and all the other games. Yes, the advertising for it must be low. Yeah, it does seem kind of weird that they seem to push it when it comes to conventions, but it seems to be pretty quiet like any other time, which I always think is a bit of a weird one. Let's have a little look down here. See you later, James. Thanks for popping in, mate. VJ says, yeah, apologies, I'm getting confused with Rivenstone. Yeah, I thought, mate, when I heard you mention something about that last week when I said something about Moonstone, and you said, I'm sick of hearing about that, and it was like, I'm pretty sure that we're getting the wires crossed here somewhere, yeah. Rivenstone was absolutely shoved down people's throats. Me, I don't know. I think everybody bar me, I think, must have been paid to talk about that one. But yeah, Moose says, I'll buy Godtear until there is a balding northern hero with huge charisma. Yeah, Time 40 Tars saying it was Rivenstone. Even got sick of hearing the name. Yeah, absolutely, mate. It was. I remember that as well. It wasn't a game that interested me either. So to be fair, I kind of avoided most of that hype stuff. But yeah, it did seem to be everywhere for a little while, didn't it? When the Kickstarter was on, I thought when you mentioned the Kickstarter there, I was like, yeah, there hasn't been a Kickstarter for Moonstone for ages. Like I think it was might have been last summer, like a year gone. So I was thinking, yeah, that's not the same one. Anyway. So we'll move on to number 4 now. So, Ed's saying, when I was looking at the start, it was about £40. An individual hero was about £25. That's not a good price compared to Underworlds, which is £25 for a full team. It's £25 for a team, but like it's still the same number of miniatures. And the difference is there's no factions to this. So you can buy whichever ones you like. So if you buy a starter box for 40 quid and then buy one faction for 25, shall we say, then that's all you need. So 65 quid and you've got a team and you've got the board. Like if you want to play Underworlds, you have to buy the starter box. And the starter box, because you'll need a board, you need the cards, you need the dice and everything else. So in terms of that, it's kind of the same price to start, really. I mean, those starter boxes are what, 65 quid, 70 quid retail price. So it's comparable, really, when it comes down to that. Right. So, number 4, the 4th game on my top 5 games of 2022 is Marvel Crisis Protocol. Now, I had this as my game of the year last year, and it's still a great game. I still really like the game, but what I would suggest is why it's not kind of number 1 anymore is I feel like it's, how can I put it? It's still a really good game. I feel like they're kind of starting to run out of, they're running out of characters now a little bit. If we look at the releases that we've had this year, other than maybe kind of the Nick Fury model with the Shield operatives and the Electro model with the hand models. Not the hand models, the hand. Since then, like kind of, we've had the Sentinels a little bit more recently, but there's been a lot of kind of a bit more obscure minis. Now, that's not to say that they've kind of run out of steam or anything like that. We've just seen the Rhino model is being kind of teased as one of the next releases. There's still a lot of stuff that haven't been covered yet, but release-wise, is through this year, I've actually not bought any Marvel Crisis Protocol minis this year. I've got a hell of a lot already, and I've been playing with the stuff that I already own, but I've not spent 1 penny on Marvel Crisis Protocol this year. However, I have played it, and I do still enjoy it. And to be honest, a lot of the enjoyment I get from the game now as well is building terrain for it and kind of 3D printing terrain and getting really nice looking tables. Of all of the different games I play, I would suggest that Marvel tends to have some of the nicest looking tables, purely because terrain's interactive, it's usable, you can pick it up and throw it around. And I just find that I like the look of a Marvel table. It's not your usual kind of sci-fi buildings, it's not your usual kind of fantasy sort of trees and sort of hills and stuff like that. There's just something I think that Marvel tables always kind of look, all right, other ones that I like to put together do anyway. But the game has recently, like literally in the last few days, just had a bit of an update with new crisis cards, and it's had some new maps as well. So it's had a little bit of an injection, a little bit of freshness injected into it as well. But I would say the releases, if you're into the visual aspect like me, like buying the cool models, the releases this year haven't been great, I would suggest. If you're into the models purely for how good they are on the table, that's a completely different story. But there's been nothing, other than maybe the Sentinels, there's been nothing really this year that's kind of grabbed my attention that made me want to kind of spend money on it. And like I say, I spent a fortune last year on it, and so I have plenty of stuff to be kind of getting on with. But yeah, Marvel is still a really good game. I'm massively looking forward to Star Wars Shatterpoint. When that comes out next year, I think what Atomic Mass Games have learned from Marvel Crisis Protocol, they will take the best bits and kind of use that in Shatterpoint. I'm a big Star Wars fan as well. but I don't really want to play kind of Legion on a bigger scale army thing. So I'm really looking forward to Shatterpoint, and that's because of how much I enjoy Marvel Crisis Protocol. So yeah, it was my game of the year last year. I've still played a lot of it this year, but I've not spent a penny on it. And there's been other stuff that I would say have been kind of higher up my list this year. Paul saying Marvel Crisis Protocol is 100% a pick up for me next year. Will sit in the box forever, but still, yeah, it's a cracking game, mate. Honestly, I really enjoy the rules. I love the miniatures, and I enjoy painting them as well. But just from a kind of like a hobby side of things, I've got plenty of stuff for Marvel, and there was nothing that really made me want to kind of buy stuff this year. I was trying to think, like some of the stuff that's come out like more recently, like the Rivals pack, the one with Wolverine and I forget, is it Sabretooth? I think that's in it, with a little motorbike and stuff. That's quite nice from a kind of diorama type thing and that. But there's not been a lot of models that's really kind of grabbed me this year. Verathon says terrain is a third player in any game. More games should make the terrain usable and interactive. I agree, mate, and it's one of the things, like I say, I bought my 3D printer, my PLA kind of plastic printer, purely for making Marvel Crisis Protocol terrain, to be fair. Corvus Games terrain makes some amazing stuff. It prints out fantastic. And I almost enjoy making the board up and making it look nice as much as I enjoy playing the game and like kind of taking some nice little photos and stuff. So yeah, there's a cool point of that. RPD says, I wish there was a co-op or a proper AI mode for Marvel. I think there's one of the organized player ones. I think might be solo player to it. Is it? It's not the Thanos one. I think one of them had a solo player, but I forget which one it was. Christian sharing the link there for the Teespring t-shirts. Thank you very much, Christian. Yes, if you want to treat yourself for Christmas. Moose says maybe Annie could be a terrain model for Godtear. You don't need any terrain in Godtear. That's why it's so quick to put together. Paul says that's him done for the night. Catch you later. See you later, Paul. Thank you very much for calling in. So yeah, that's my kind of my fourth one. So fifth was Godtear by Steamforged. Fourth was Marvel Crisis Protocol by Atomic Mass Games. VG says he's keen to get a filament printer when I move for printing terrain. Now I have the man cave. Yeah, I must admit, I've hardly used my resin printer, if I'm perfectly honest. It's there. I still use it now and again for bits and pieces. The filament one, if you like, the plastic one, I think I've used it a lot more because it's generally a little bit less hassle when it comes to kind of the post kind of processing type stuff, and for making nice big bits of terrain and stuff like that. I've really enjoyed using it for that. Northern Realm says, how do you feel about Shatterpoint being Clone Wars only? I'm alright with that, mate. I quite like it. I like the Clone Wars cartoons. I quite like that kind of era of Star Wars. I think at some point over time it'll expand. There's no way they'll just only leave it Clone Wars. I think that's just where it's starting, in much the same way that Legion started off in the original trilogy with Vader and Luke Skywalker. I think at some point it'll grow from there, but they have to start somewhere. Where are we up to here? Christian says, I think the Hulk has a PDF download for solo player and possibly another of the villains. Yeah, I forget now, mate. I've definitely got all of the little kind of leaflets and stuff that came in the boxes. There was definitely one of them had a solo like mission type thing in it, and I forget which one it was. Or Greg Cherry saying solo is Colossus and Juggernaut. I think there was an earlier one as well, mate, because Colossus and Juggernaut, I think, were much more recent. So yeah, I think there was an earlier one than that as well. Smudge is saying Shatterpoint is something me and my son can get into because I want a smaller model count than Legion. Yep, I agree with that, mate. Kenneth Brown saying I keep wanting Marvel models, but they're so darn expensive. I can get a combat patrol for the same as a couple of models. I get that, mate, but by the same stretch, like they're generally on offer, so there's lots of places have them discounted, and you physically need a lot less models to play the game. So it's all case, it depends upon what you're looking for. If you're looking for the models to play the game, it's a lot cheaper than a lot of other games to buy to buy like a team for Marvel and play that. It gets expensive if you want to collect them, because there's a lot of different choices, and they're not cheap models. But to compare it to a Combat Patrol, it's like, well, you can buy a Combat Patrol box, but then you can't play a full game of 40k with it, so then you still have to buy more to go towards it, in the same way you only have to maybe buy 4 or 5 models for Marvel, and you've got a full team. So it's kind of swings and roundabouts. It depends upon how you kind of look at it from a price perspective. Dormammu, that's the one it is, mate. Thank you very much. I remember now. I do have that one. Let's have a little look here. Highland Fairron says game suggestions and painting accompaniment. Thanks, BlackJack. Because you are welcome. Chessie Kennedy says, is your resin printer still in the toilet? It's not, mate. It's in the garage now. It's other side of that wall there. My resin printer and my other 3D printer are kind of in the garage now, out of the house. That what used to be the studio in the house, and that ensuite, which I converted into somewhere to use my resin printers and stuff. When I moved all of the stuff to record in the studio down here, that went back to being a bedroom and a bathroom. Northern Realm says, MCP is such a good game though. When I first played it, I thought it was overly simple and shallow, but after a handful of games, it opened up so much. Honestly, there's so much to love about it, from the actual rules themselves. I love, like I said before, I love how the tables look. I think it's a fantastic looking game, but it kind of lives up to it as well. The rules and it's kind of simple in its basics, but I like the way that if you're taking damage, you're getting power to kind of use and make you stronger to kind of fight back. It's a clever mechanic. Ed says, MCP started as Avengers versus Cabal. We'll get the original trilogy Eerie and Shatterpoint at least. Yeah, I think over a period of time, mate, that's exactly what will happen. Northern Realm says, I think Ultron and Rhino are ultimate encounters too. Ultron wasn't made because Ultron came in the starter box, but there might have been a... Was it? Oh, I can't remember now. I'll have to look at some point. Greg saying, was organised player there Colossus put on Juggernaut's helmet, not a retail release? Oh, an organised player one. Yeah, it still might have been later as well though, mate. Yeah. RPD saying the MCP models are amazing. Yeah, I think they're good. And Ed saying £20 to £30 for 2 units is hardly expensive. I think they are expensive. I think they're expensive because you kind of compare them to other stuff. So you can get like a box of, say, you can get a box of 10 models for like £30, or you can get a box like with 1 model in for Marvel for like £30. So when you compare them like that, it seems expensive. But when you think that 1 unit is just a unit in a game that you need to have hundreds of models, versus that £30 model for Marvel is one of like 4 that you need, kind of thing. That's when it gets, if you're buying it just for number of models, it's expensive. If you're buying it for how many models you need to play the game, then it's not that expensive. Andrew says, have they restocked the core box? I didn't realise it was out of stock, mate. It seems quite sort of... I think it's quite available in the UK. It doesn't seem to be out of stock, mate. Tony said, I really should do a PDF for my duck zombie puss. Your unfriendly neighbourhood slimy man. Yeah, Ed saying there's a downloadable Ultron Ultimate counter. There is now, I remember that, mate. I was going to say it didn't come in the box, that's right. Northern Realms saying you need at least 3 or 4 combat patrols for a full game of 40k. Yeah, exactly that. And this is where we always get in this conversation about the price of things and about value. It's like, and this is kind of one of the things where when I talk about kind of Games Workshop models, whether they're expensive or not, technically they're not that expensive compared to other models. So for example, if you take a box of 5 Malifaux models, for example, because the box is right next to it there, 5 Malifaux models is probably the same price as a box of 10 models for Star Wars. So price per model is not that, like, sort of, it's not massively out of line, or it's not that expensive. The problem is it's a game that you need lots of models for, and that's where it becomes expensive. So all of a sudden an army costs you £500, where a faction for Malifaux might cost you £60 or £70. And it's the same kind of thing with Marvel as well, is that on initial inspection, the models look really, really expensive when you realise you only need 3 or 4 of them. Like probably 4 to 6 models is your average crew size. That's the difference. Unless you start collecting them, and then it becomes very expensive. And Ed's saying there, yeah, I don't really care about number of models. It's all about playable units for me. And I'm kind of the same as well, mate. If I'm playing the game, then that's the kind of thing. RPD says Fallout Wasteland Warfare is more expensive. I've heard that before as well, mate, but I'm not familiar with the models or the prices for that one. Explore Norfolk says, hush, don't give GW any ideas about box sets being good value and good even. Value is a perception thing, isn't it? Value is really, like, if you're somebody that just wants to paint models, then maybe GW boxes are good value, because you buy a Combat Patrol box and you get quite a lot of models in there if you just want to build and paint them. The difference is if you want to do something with them, and that's what we're kind of having a chat about. Northern Realm says there was an ultimate encounter for him in the core box. Was there? I don't remember that. I mean, they might have been. I got that core box 2 years ago, so maybe I forgot about that, but I didn't think there was, mate. Kenneth Brown, good evening. Says, I love Malifaux. It's sad the community died out in my area. Yeah, I think that's the same for a lot of games. Like some games, it's funny, I heard a conversation the other day about Horus Heresy, very similar. Somebody saying, is Horus Heresy dead? I saw loads of places like having it on sale for Black Friday, and I never hear anybody talk about it. And then there was loads of people saying, well, it's more popular than 40k in my area. And I think it's just like local pockets. I think and a lot of games are a bit like that. Oliver says, I would appreciate if there were more tower ascending, one hero or more to Dev to the floor. I'm not sure what that means. Andrew says, imagine playing a full game of 40k instead of a smaller one. I think it just means by the standard size. I mean, there's very few people play kind of 40k, I would suggest, at very, very small points levels. That's kind of one of the big problems, isn't it? Paul says, if you compare games with low model count to games with high model count games always look cheaper on price per miniature. Yeah, and that's because the companies know that they have to, like, you've got to buy them. Like, if it was £40 for three, well, it is in some cases. Let's say it was £100 for 10 Space Marines. Let's say it was £10 a model. Like, for example, it doesn't matter what game you play. If it was £10 a model, if you played a game where you only need 5 models versus a game where you need hundreds of models, of course it's expensive, which is why the price obviously comes down significantly. Spoonie said, I think Malifaux died a bit when it changed edition, just like X-Wing did. I'm not sure. I think it's different areas, mate. It's alive and well, I promise you. Jess says, I think I've got everything they released for slaying whole factions, and it's way less cash than 2,000 point 40k army. However much books I need. I think it just depends, mate. It depends what you want to do with them. Tony saying, as a painty type, I don't want masses of troops. So if I paint GW, Warhammer Underworlds, warbands tend to be a pretty solid buy. Yeah, definitely, mate, yeah. RPD saying, in the Marvel Crisis Protocol box, I don't think there's an encounter. Yeah, I didn't think there was either, mate. It might have been the first organised play box that came out, but I don't think it came out with the. I don't think it was in the box, if you like. Kenneth says, you taught me into it. I love the Sabertooth Mini. Yes. Don't you think, Dave, I recently got back from PAX Unplugged, and the highlight for me was Cyberpunk Combat Zone. Calling it now as my game of the year for next year. I've not even heard of it, mate. Lord Nova says, I love painting superheroes, so I print them for use in the game called Supers by the same creator of Starbreach. It's a pretty fun game, and you can make a lot of the same heroes with the keywords. Yeah, I guess you can do that, mate. I'm not really that bothered about printing them. That's the thing. So I quite like the quality of the Marvel ones. So we'll get back to the list now. Number 3 on this year's top 5 games of 2022 is Kings of War by Mantic Games. Now, Kings of War is a game that has been around for quite a while now. Over 10 years. I think like 11 or 12 years it's been around now. But I would say this last year, we've really seen some kind of... I think Mantic are starting to get a little bit into their stride a bit now with Kings of War. We've seen the new Red Book come out, which is the 3.5 rules, which was like an amalgamation of pulling all of the different kind of supplements and rules and bits and pieces together. which has really tidied up the rules quite a lot. We've seen some new armies coming out. So we've seen Empire of Dust come out this year. We've seen Riftforged Orcs come out this year. We've seen the new Ogres come out this year. There's been quite a lot of releases this year, actually. And we're talking full new kind of army boxes. This was the year we started to see a lot of those 2-player starter sets with like a couple of sort of taster factions in there as well. And the new 3rd edition rules, or the 3.5 rules, have also now included ambush as well, which means that there's now a real option of getting into Kings of War at a lower point cost, where you can kind of get in and play at like 750 points to 1,000 points with a lot less models on the table, which gives you a good starting point to get your first models built, get your first models painted, play some games, and keep playing while you're building up your army to maybe to bigger 2,000, 2,500 point levels in the background. It's massively supported by Mantic. It's their flagship game. It really is kind of very popular. There's tournaments almost every weekend. You might not find that there's a local kind of sort of a local player base where you are, but you'll find that if you look kind of like, you don't have to look too far to find people who play it. Yes, it's not as popular as kind of 40k or AOS in terms of overall kind of support from like gaming stores and stuff, but there's a really, really passionate community that puts on a lot of events for it. And you'll like if it's something that you're interested in and you want to play, you'll be able to find people playing it. You just have to look for it. That's all. You won't fall over them, kind of thing. You'll have to go and look, but you will find them. And I just think that Kings of War this year, it feels like it's kind of, we're coming out of that kind of lockdown period now from the last few years where kind of conventions hadn't got back together properly yet, sort of tournaments hadn't quite started up, and I think this year has been a real chance where Kings of War 3rd edition really kind of kicked on. We saw those new armies, we saw a lot of new players coming in, and I think it's been a good year for Kings of War this year. And it's a game I've played a few times this year. I say a few, I've played it multiple times this year. And it's something I intend to play more of next year, really, I think. So yeah, Kings of War is in 3rd place this year. Let's have a little look here. Andre saying, it's not the price of the models that gets me, it's the constant need to buy codexes and new editions. That's a different argument. I don't play GW games, so I haven't really got an opinion on it. I don't even... What annoys me more, I'll be perfectly honest, is how annoyed people get about a game system that they don't buy and they don't play. Like, it's just like, don't worry about it. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing. I don't play GW games, not because I hate them or anything like that. I just don't. I don't find the games fun generally. They're a bit more complex than I need games to be, so I just don't play them. So therefore, I don't badmouth them. I don't like. There's some really beautiful models. There's some I would love to buy just to paint, but I'm not going to kind of bitch about them. Which is why my channel does not get the tens of thousands of views that the bitching about GW channels get. Northern Realm says, the thing no one talks about with GW combat patrols is how many redundant models you get in them. I think the problem is when you're saying about redundant models, mate, is if you're looking at it from a competitive perspective, that might be the case. But if you're looking at it from just somebody that buys models and puts them on the table, which I think a big chunk of GW's audience do, and that's the small portion that play the games, not the ones that just buy them and collect them, it's irrelevant really whether they're redundant or not. They're only redundant if you need to buy them to play competitive lists, and I think that is such a tiny percentage of the audience. Like that's why it's not really kind of worth worrying about. Mark Zelensky, hello mate, how are you doing? Says Kings of War, hooray. Northern Realm says, so often you end up with multiple characters, big models that are totally useless. Like I say, only if you're coming at it from a competitive perspective. Mark says, the new starter box is nice value with nice new models. Yeah, the new stuff, mate, is Empire of Dust and the new Ogres, to like brand new sculpts, brand new models. It looks fantastic. And you also get the brand new rulebook in there as well. Andrea saying, now that I have a 3D printer, I'm going to play a lot more Kings of War. Yeah, I'll be honest, like 3D printing big armies for me, like just doesn't really interest me. I get other people want to do it and like all power to them and stuff like that, but I just kind like for me, I just kind of think we you kind of need to support the companies that make the games, otherwise the games won't be supported. So for me, like 3D printing armies is not really something that I kind of want to mess about with. I'd rather just like, if you take for example the Kings of War like mega armies, for the price of them you get a hell of a lot of models, especially when you factor in that there's a lot of discounts flying around as well. You get a hell of a lot of models for a lot less hassle than 3D printing stuff. So for me personally, and this is not for everybody, I'm not telling you you're wrong or right for doing it a different way, but for me personally, I'll always try and kind of support the company that makes if the company that makes the game makes models, then I'll try and support them. Where we have James is saying, yeah, another shout for Kings of War. Yes. Mark saying we will take third place. Yeah, it's let's be honest, it's my top, it's in my top 3. So there you go, in my top 3 games I've played this year. Jess says I want to build a small Kings of War army next year. I think the new ambush stuff, mate, and the new ambush boxes that come out in January are a fantastic way for those on the fence, because I think they're going to be like, I'm sure, don't hold me to this, but I'm sure they're going to be like around like the £30, £40 mark for what you get in the box. I don't think they're going to be expensive. So I think that's going to be a great way to kind of dive in. Andrew saying they suffered when Warhammer Fantasy died and that community made their own game instead of just jumping on the game already there. They suffered. Do you mean Kings of War suffered? Kings of War took off when Warhammer Fantasy died. It was a perfect combination of the 2nd edition rules came out for Kings of War, and then not long after it, the old world was ended, and actually big chunks of the old kind of Warhammer Fantasy players went over and played Kings of War. It didn't hurt it at all. It was a kind of it was the thing that really kicked Kings of War off, mate. Northern Realm says he's painting the kill team stuff now. Don't know what you're on about. Andrew says that a dig at Discourse. It's a dig at any channel that basically spends their time complaining about Games Workshop but doesn't actually play their games. Like, me and Discourse are friends. Like, it's not a dig at her personally. Like, she plays Games Workshop games. I'm not having a dig at her. It's a dig at anybody that basically just bitches about stuff for clicks when they actually have no interest in what it is. Colin saying my game for sure. Yeah. Moose is saying Kings of War are. Smudge says like Kings of War, now they have the low entry with ambush rules. You always kind of could play at smaller points levels. It's just they've kind of changed some of the list building now to make sure that it's slightly more balanced at smaller points. Alex says being corrupted, how dare you get back in the Dino bandwagon. John says good evening from South Ontario. Says what's the consensus? Is it a case of everybody likes what they like? Oh, 100% everybody likes what they like. I mean, this is what I'm telling you, like what I'm talking about tonight is my top 5 games, not the community's top 5, not what I think other people like, not what I'm telling other people they should play. Everybody likes what they like, but it's my channel, so I'm telling you what I think. Type 40 Towers is saying Overdrive for Game of the Year. RPD says 3D printing takes ages. 3D printing has its place. I'm not against 3D printing. I have 3D printers. I'm not against it at all. And it does take a while, but then I guess if you compare 3D printing and the time it takes to ordering some models online and waiting for them to be delivered, or the time it takes you to get in the car and drive to the shop and buy it and come back again and then build them, like all of these things take time. For me, it's like I'm not like into 3D printing enough to fine tune everything to get the absolute perfect prints. And I've had more failed prints, like trying to kind of print bits and pieces out, that it ends up just becoming a pain in the arse. And I'd rather have just went and bought a box of models at that stage. And then the added bonus of at some point, if it, like, in order to keep these companies going, you need to support them if you want them to support the game, kind of thing. We're talking about Guild Ball dying. Like, there were many reasons why Guild Ball went the way it did, but nobody was buying minis anymore. Now, that might have been because they weren't in the shops to buy. It might have also been the fact that actually it got to a point where it was just everybody had what they had. Yeah, Clyde saying I jumped on Mantic Kings of War when they killed the old world. Yeah, it was the real kind of. I mean, Mantic didn't kind of make it happen, but it was the point where, if I remember right, and I thought if Mark's around, he'll probably tell me better, but I think there was points in time where a lot of the different old world communities, the Warhammer Fantasy communities around, especially around the States, kind of voted on what they were going to do. Were they going to do Ninth Age, or were they going to do Kings of War? And big chunks of them went over to Kings of War, which is what I think really kind of pushed Kings of War on at that particular point in time. Jess says, I fancy starting a Goblin army, but I'm guessing it's going to get big numbers of minis. I'd definitely be grabbing a Goblin one if they do one for Ambush. They are doing one for Ambush, mate. And it is a bit more of a horde army, but you can kind of pack it with some of the bigger models to kind of take down on some of the troops. Ed says all the local fantasy players went to Ninth Age rather than Kings of War. They might have done locally made, but that wasn't the case everywhere. Like Kings of War massively grew at that point in time, but it wouldn't be the case everywhere. Like some people did go to Ninth Age, but obviously not everywhere. Clyde saying love them undead. Yeah, I mean they were quite sort of some of the original models, I think. James is saying I think Kings of War Ambush will replace Vanguard. I think Vanguard will come back in a different guise in the future. The problem with Vanguard is it's not a stepping stone to Kings of War. So if you take Dead Zone, for example, from a sci-fi perspective, you can buy Dead Zone models, and then if you want to step up to Firefight, you can take their models and you can use them in Firefight. The rules are relatively kind of familiar. Like there's a lot of crossover between Dead Zone rules and Firefight rules. When it comes to Vanguard, the models are all individual. When it comes to Kings of War, most people tend to kind of multi-base their models and kind of stick them all to one big footprint. So it's not like you can kind of move between the two unless you're constantly using kind of movement trays and stuff. The rules are very different. Like it's not even like kind of similar in the way it works. So it's not the stepping stone that I think it was initially envisioned that it would be. Ambush now becomes a bit of a stepping stone at a lower points cost, but I think there's still room for Ambush for Vanguard. Sorry, as a completely different game with different rules. I think it's just Mantic are a relatively small company and they've got a lot of plates that are spinning at the minute, and Vanguard's a little bit down the list. But I think at some point they will revisit it. I think it's ready for like a second edition now. Let's have a little look here. John saying, I'm not really quite sure what totally new games came out this year. There's been a lot to try and keep abreast of. I know Osprey released a couple of new games I'd buy. Yeah, I'm not sure if you saw at the start, mate. This is not really about new games. I don't. If I only talked about new games that came out each year, I'd be talking about a lot of games that I never played, and that would be a very, very small list. If I talk about brand new games that came out this year and games I've played, there'd probably be one game on the list. So. Yeah, Mark says there was a voting to decide if a community would go on Ninth Age or Kings of War. Yeah, I remember hearing about that. Spoony says he's got a garage full of Kings of War. Sadly, I've just never had the drive to build it all. It's not for everybody. It's a bigger scale game. Like I say, I'm not. This is kind of people like what people like. It's third on my list this year. Andrew says I should clarify. Yes, Kings of War grew with the end of Warhammer, but it should have been at today's level then. Ninth Age was the reason. Ninth Age can't be the reason why. I'm not going to go there. At the end of the day, some people play Ninth Age, some people play Kings of War, but Kings of War took a massive big jump at that point in time, and then it's also had a whole new set of rules and loads of more models and everything else since then. Like the games just grew in the same time the companies grew. Like it's not one or the other. It, like folks are choosing to play whatever they want to play. I don't really know what you're getting at there. Sick Mary says, really want to start a Northern Alliance army, but it seems the only way to get the half-elf berserkers is with the Mega Army box. I'm not so sure. I'm not that familiar with which models come in which boxes. Camo says, are the Veermen the same as Kings of War Ratkin? I think there's a lot of crossover maybe between them. There's a lot of units that are kind of like multi-use. Obviously, the Veermen in sort of Firefight and Dead Zone have like laser guns and stuff. Like, obviously they don't have them, but there is some crossover between the models. Colin says, I honestly, I say this, Kings of War is the game I wish Fantasy had been. I never played Fantasy, mate, so I can't really comment on it. That's where it was. Andrew saying, Kings of War looked a little too much like budget Warhammer. This new stuff is awesome. This is I mentioned this when I did the Ogre video about the Ogre Sprue. Like, years ago, Mantic's models quality wasn't particularly great. Their Undeads was fantastic. I like their dwarf models. They've got a lot of character, but they don't fit together particularly very well. I don't like the little kind of round plug bases that they had that fitted into those kind of little squares. The elves weren't everybody's taste. Like, they were designed to be cheap alternatives for Warhammer Fantasy when they first came out. And then over time, Mantic's direction changed and they started to focus more on their own game and focus on their own rules. And that's where we get things like Northern Alliance coming out. That's where we get things like the Night Stalkers coming out. And all of the different factions, the Halflings. We get different factions that weren't kind of involved in the original kind of fantasy stuff, if you like. But yeah, that's just because the company grew over time. It wasn't like a... Yeah, I think it's a fair comment, really, because that's what it was. It was budget Warhammer, really, when Mantic first started. Super Pumpkin Man says, after the old world died, I stopped altogether and only got into AOS through Warcry. Thanks to Andy talking about it. Yeah, like I said before, I'd never played Warhammer Fantasy. I've never really had any interest in it. It kind of died out almost before I was even really into Warhammer, into wargaming rather. So yeah, it's something I'd never really, like, rank and flank stuff back then just didn't interest me. Jess is saying, looking forward to some multi-basin. Not hugely keen on the wolfy beast faces for the goblins, but I might be painting to tweak or get the fun of a kit bash. Yeah, make it work. Make what works for you, mate. That's the way to do it. Spoonie says, it's a big scale, but I'm doing Horus Heresy now, and I jumped on a Firefight bandwagon. Vicky says, there's a bunch of new Ratkin minis that were in the Kings of War starter box with the Gobos. Man, that's a great starter box. I know John has been he's been doing some Veermen for Firefight, but he's been magnetizing the bases so he can use them in Kings of War as well. So there's definitely some crossover between a lot of the models. Mark says, a huge problem for Mantic is the lack of availability of some models they make. For example, Snow Foxes. Yeah, I think it's there is a lot of, I wouldn't disagree with that, mate. There's a lot of stuff that's kind of they used to have stuff in their books where models weren't available. There's certain boxes where it only makes sense because they come on sprues with other stuff, or like it only makes sense because they make enough of them. If they go in like a starter box or something like that, or they're made in resin, and if you want lots of them, they're too expensive. There's a lot of stuff that Mantic kind of like sort of need to sort of improve on in that respect. But again, they're not a massive company, and we kind of like, I'm not saying we cut them some slack, but I think sometimes we just have to like understand that, you know, that there is GW, this huge big sort of company. And then there is everybody else, and they're all like the gap between them in terms of size of business and stuff like that, size of company, amount of people working for them is like completely sort of miles apart. Like there's probably more people work in the GW marketing department than work in Mantic completely, including all the warehouse operators and the resin casters and everybody. There he is, John Estel just joined. He heard my name. Yeah, the Nightmares are some of the bigger things which work across both games. And Spoonie says, Mantic's biggest problem is covering so many games with such a small team, and games fall through the cracks. Overdrive, Vanguard, and Dreadball. The problem is with things like Overdrive and Dreadball is that they don't need more stuff. This is the thing. Like Dreadball, for example, has about 20 teams. There's models for all of them. They don't like it's still a live game, if you like. They still sell it, but there's just nothing like actively like needed to develop it further. And this is what happens is basically when you're a small company, you kind of you can't work on everything all of the time. Anyway, let's come down to number 2 on the list. So this my second game of 2022, or number 2 of my top 5, is Malifaux by Weird Games. Now, I've mentioned this loads of times on these streams and in videos. Malifaux has a special place in my heart. I absolutely love the Malifaux world, the universe. I think the Malifaux miniatures are among the best miniatures that you can buy, especially plastic-wise. I'm not a huge fan of metal miniatures. There are some nice metal miniatures out there, but I'm not a fan of them. I hate building them. I hate sort of painting them. I much prefer plastic miniatures. And I honestly think that the Malifaux miniatures are up there with the best, if not some of the best plastic sculpts that are out there. There's so much character in them. There's so much choice. It doesn't matter what kind of faction you're looking for. All of the different factions have kind of different aesthetics, whether it be kind of more horror, whether it's a bit more quirky with things like the my brain's gone blank here now. The not the goblins. What am I thinking of? You know what I mean? The little green guys. my brain's gone mad. There's so much different. There's so many different factions in terms of style and aesthetic that there's something for everybody. I love the background world. I love the podcast that they do with the Breach Broadside. The Gremlins, that's what it is. I couldn't remember. Hello, Kyle. Good timing. There's just so much about it that I absolutely love. And it's a game that I didn't play a lot in 2nd edition. I played an absolute ton of it in 1st edition. I think I probably just kind of burned out in it, if I'm totally honest. But when 3rd edition came around, I came back into it again, and I love this is like the plastic sculpts. Like when I was back playing it in 1st, it was all metal sculpts, but then a lot of people were metal sculpts back then. By the time I'd come back to it in 3rd edition, it was all plastic at this point. The fact that we've had 2 expansion books this year, we've had Malifaux Burns, and we've had the Madness of Malifaux as well. We've had the new rules for the Masters coming out. There's a ton of new stuff coming out. It's not that long ago that we had the Explorer Society come. I just find that the card mechanic of Malifaux, the fact that you can just chop and change with kind of you can take one model out and bring a new model in, and it changes the way that your whole your whole crew plays. The art style of Malifaux, the narrative aspect in the background, the way that the scenarios that you're playing are much more kind of objective based and not just about killing each other. I just find it's a game that I keep going back to. It's a game that I enjoy just painting the miniatures. It's a game I enjoy reading the books. I've said this many times. If I was only going to kind of play one game or read the background for one game ever, Malifaux is that game. And it's a game that I think in 2023 I'm going to go into a lot deeper this year. I'm currently my 3D printer is buzzing away at the minute, and it's printing out some nice bits of terrain to put on tables. It's something I'm working on for next year in the background, that I want to be able to put a nice table together for Malifaux. It'll take me ages to print off all the bits of terrain and get it painted and stuff. So I'm not really kind of making a big song and dance about it now. But it's something that I have a real passion for, but I don't talk about it a lot really. I never ever miss an episode of the Breachside broadcast. I read the books. I love reading the Through the Breach RPG book just for the different stories and the background. It's something that it's become a real kind of sort of passion hobby for me in the background, and it's something that I don't really talk about very much. And it's funny because literally about half an hour before I came on the live stream tonight, I got an email through from YouTube which tells you your stats for the last year. And one of the things it said in this email was that the live stream that I did on Malifaux about how to get started was my most viewed live stream of the last 12 months. And I must admit, I never really go back and look at the older videos to see how they're doing. I just I concentrate on moving on and doing the next one. And I was quite interested that it was the Malifaux one, because I always kind of feel that sort of it's a game that people who love the game play the game, and they talk about it in Discords and stuff like that. But I always feel on YouTube it's relatively quiet. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe I've been wrong about it in the past. But yeah. So Malifaux is my number 2 game of 2022, and it's something I will definitely be playing more of in 2023. Yes, Goblins. Why could I not remember the name? Gremlins, sorry. Why could I not remember the name Gremlins? I kept thinking Goblins, and I'm thinking, it's not Goblins. I know it's not Goblins. Let's have a little look. Spoonie was saying, totally agree about Dreadball was huge first edition. Second edition didn't have the steamroller effect. I think it was because the first edition was launched by a Kickstarter. The second edition was more of a tidy-up, I think. Yeah, Kyle saying, hey, Malifaux, what a time to come in, mate. Spoonie says, Malifaux miniatures are the best minis around, intricate and frustrating also. I actually really like building them. So I said this a few times in the past. I'm not somebody that really kit bashes models. I quite like single pose miniatures. I find they're a bit more dynamic. It allows them to have some really intricate and really clever posing. And so I quite like that. Like, sometimes there's a little bit of a puzzle to putting them together to the point where it's like, that once that arm gets in exactly the right position, it fits perfectly. Some of the GW miniatures are a bit like that as well. So I don't enjoy building models, but I actually don't mind, and I quite enjoy building those kind of single pose models. And there's something about the Malifaux ones, I just absolutely love them. Each one is like telling its own little story. Tony saying I should really paint another Malifaux mini. You should, mate. You're a hell of a painter, and I love seeing what you do. You should definitely paint more Malifaux. Clyde says, loved Malifaux metal ones, but their plastic ones are amazing. Back in the day, Malifaux metal models, bearing in mind kind of we're going back, my God, are we going back like 10 years ago or something now? We're going back some time. Like Malifaux metal models back then were absolutely amazing. Like they were kind of like, they were standout models against like sort of about what everybody else was doing, because there wasn't really many people doing kind of plastics back then. Like War Machine was pretty much all metal stuff back then. We started to get some plastics a bit later on, but they weren't great. But War Machine, which was huge back then, was all metal stuff. I'm trying to think what else was kind of kicking around at that point. Like even Games Workshop had metal models and stuff like in their range, like from Warhammer Fantasy and stuff, which are the ones that ended up being fine cast, and then obviously over time a lot of that stuff was phased out. But back then, like the metal models back then when they first came out were fantastic. But I just think the plastic ones now have just really kind of raised the game to a different level as well. Let's have a little look here. John says, I was in the process of building a Warhammer army when the game ended. Yeah. Yeah, Gremlins from the Bayou. I just could not remember the name. Could not remember it there. Where are we? Up here. John saying, I kind of prefer games without endless expansions and add-ons. The thing is with an expansion, mate, is it is completely optional. All games expand in some way, because if they don't, you get the opposite of what people are complaining about games like Dreadball and stuff like that, where they say, well, there's nothing new comes out for it. Like, if you don't expand a game, if you don't sort of keep going with it, how does the game grow? How does the game develop? How do you kind of sort of, how do you keep it alive? The difference with expansions is they are all optional, and you can choose to play those expansions. You can choose to ignore them expansions. So for me, it's the best way to expand a game without completely kind of killing off like the core game, if you like, the core engine. The thing with Malifaux is, and it's always been like this, is that those expansions bring in a whole host of new models, and they bring in a whole host of new stories and narrative and background. And for me, like they're books that are like pieces of art. I absolutely love the art style. I love just like reading the stuff that's in them. There's very few games where I actually go and kind of read the background. Malifaux is one of them, and I quite like those expansions. I think it's a way to keep a game alive, like I say, without really kind of sort of like detracting from the core engine. Let's have a little look here. Sick Mary says, Through the Breach, the Malifaux RPG is also fantastic. So there's three kind of components to Malifaux stuff. There's obviously the core game Malifaux, the original one, which is now in its 3rd edition. There's Through the Breach, which is the RPG, which has some fantastic source books as well. So if you love Malifaux, the information, the stories, the background that's in those books is absolutely beautiful. Obviously, it's a great system as well, and works with cards, like almost like tarot card type things. It's a fantastic RPG system as well. There is also the other side, which, from a narrative perspective, if you think there's a breach opened and we have people from Earth going through the breach into Malifaux, the other side is a bit more of an army scale game, where basically coming from the breaches that open are the inhabitants of Malifaux coming through to Earth, and the battle takes place on Earth. And again, it's another game that I'd like to kind of play more of. It's something that is not massively kind of talked about. I like to play it, I think, but it is very underrepresented, shall we say. But again, I love reading through that rule book as well for the background, the story about I was saying, about the King's Men, about was it the Cult of the Burning Man, and the Gibbering Hordes as well, which are like the 4 main factions. Let's have a little look here. Jez is saying Malifaux is like Venice-based Infinity. It's got beautiful minis and its players adore it. Yeah, it's got a really, really kind of passionate community, and it's another game, much like Marvel Crisis Protocol, that always has beautiful tables. People really do kind of take care of, sort of, they pour their passion into painting their crews. They make the tables look beautiful. There are some people who kind of run tournaments, especially ones in the UK. I've not seen any abroad, but obviously I used to kind of be quite involved in the tournaments back in first edition. But the tables always just looked fantastic, and it's not just that standard kind of sci-fi or fantasy type of table. Like, people create all sorts of like Western towns, Victorian towns, like little mining villages and stuff like that. There's so much like different in the aesthetics. Yeah, Clyde's saying it's about 10 years, yeah. Northern Realms is saying, and I got loads of Malifaux terrain. If you fancy showing me the ropes of third, absolutely, mate. Would absolutely love to. Where are we up to here again? Andrew says, Malifaux and the event you ran was my assembly PSD moment. Glued models crumbling in my hand. Killed a 100-day hobby streak for months. Would play it if anyone local invited me, though. Honestly, I mean, like, it's everybody has their own opinions, mate. I don't get that. I know people complain about kind of like smaller models. I don't find them any smaller than anything else. I don't find them any more fiddly than anything else. I've definitely found more fiddly models from Mantic. I've found more fiddly models from GW. I absolutely detest putting together the metal minis from Infinity. Like, I would take, like, for example, Marvel minis get the same kind of flack as well about how fiddly they are to put together. And as somebody that doesn't enjoy building minis, I've never really I've not had that same issue. Moose is saying I get similar issues from building other companies' minis. Sometimes the hobby just turns you off. It can do, mate. Not everything's for everybody. That's the whole thing, isn't it? Verathon says, I know a lot of people who are interested in Malifaux but aren't willing to jump in and get a team. Sometimes it just takes one person, mate. Sometimes it just takes one person to be that kind of, to start the ball rolling. And it's easy to kind of complain, and this is not aimed at you, but it's easy to say that nobody wants to play, but then, like, somebody has to be the advocate sometimes. And normally what happens is if it only takes 2 people to want to play, and if you're one of them, you've only got to find one other person. Smudge says, Malifaux is the game where I'm confused about where to start. I did a video about it a while ago, and it's a lot more simple than you think, actually. It's only confusing as an absolute new player looking in, because there isn't like a starter box, if you like. There isn't like a 2-player starter box. And it's designed that basically you start where you want to start. You buy the crew that you want to buy. And that's the best place to start, basically. So I'll try and put a link back in the video or something like that in the description about the link back to the original video. Tony says, correction, if the other side counts, I've painted a portal and a bus from the Cult of the Burning Man. Yes, you did, mate. I remember that now. Spoonie says, Malifaux's setting success was that it had about 10 themes, genres crammed into a small space. So I'm pretty sure I'm right when I say this, because I'm sure I've read this somewhere before. Originally, when Weird started, Weird were a miniatures company and they didn't have a game, and they were just sculpting different types of miniatures for painters, basically. I think it was, I'm trying to remember. I don't want to get it wrong, so I won't say the name, but one of the 2 creators, if you like, of Malifaux, or who started Weird Games, was a really, really kind of good painter. And that was essentially where the miniatures come from. They were sculpted for painters to want to paint. So eventually there was a whole range of weird and wonderful different miniatures, and they decided to create a game. And the game ended up with this kind of weird and wonderful theme to incorporate those miniatures in. How can we pull all of these different themes and styles into one story, if you like? And that was where Malifaux came from. Spoonie says, you've never built a zombie chihuahua. Then I have built a zombie chihuahua. It's the ones with the little kind of arm in the mouth. Yeah, I didn't have an issue. Yeah, Cards was saying there, yeah, the minis came first and the game followed after. Here we are 17 years later. 17 years, mate. Wow. I've said this many times before. I started painting Warhammer stuff for a few years, got a big collection, decided I would try and kind of learn how to play, didn't enjoy it, sold all my Warhammer stuff the next day, and discovered Malifaux. So Malifaux was the first game that I ever really played, and I'm sure it had just come out at Gen Con that summer, and then probably I'm talking about like September, October that year. So I remember buying that first edition rule book and looking through the different crews. I had a Colette was my first ever crew, Colette and the Showgirls with the Coryphée, and yeah, and I remember taking them to my first ever tournament, and then my collection grew and I had lots of different stuff after that. But yeah, Colette and the Showgirls was my first ever crew. Tony saying, yeah, Eric, my mate from an old Australian forum. Yeah, Tiny Souls was the name of the forum. There you go. I didn't know that, mate. Mark Barracloth, good evening to you, mate. How are you doing? Smudge says, we'll definitely check out that video. Yeah. Right. So let's wrap up. How are we doing for time? Anyway, where's my clock? 10:30, 25 to 11. We'll end with my game of the year this year. So yeah, my number one pick. And as I said before, the criteria to get to this stage was essentially it had to be a game I've played this year, and it had to be something that's been kind of like sort of supported by the developer and is still available to buy. And that game this year, I think won't be a surprise to many, is Firefight by Mantic. I've always wanted to have a sci-fi game that I'm kind of like, that I'm passionate about, that I enjoy playing, and Warhammer never really scratched that itch. Now, a lot of people won't like kind of be going, are you mad? Like all that wonderful background, the beautiful minis and all that kind of stuff. I am a gamer as well. I love painting. I love collecting. I love the background stuff. But I have to want to enjoy to play the game as well. And Warhammer stuff was never really my bag. Now, a Firefight came out this year, and I'll be honest, some of the models are not my favourites for Firefight. There are some that they're all right, but they're not amazing. There's some that I've not really liked when I've seen it online, but when I've had them in my hand, the models are much better than I thought they were from the photographs I've seen online. I never really liked the Enforcers from the pictures, but when they came in the starter box, I absolutely loved painting them, and now they're my favourite army. But the Firefight's rules are super simple in terms of the basics to get playing, and they just give a 90-minute game of absolutely fun sci-fi gaming. And is it going to be a game that I play like kind of constantly every year, like all the time? Is it my main game? Probably not. But this year, it's been the game that's kind of stood out to me. It's the game I've played more than anything else. It's the game that I've probably painted more for this year than anything else. And I've really enjoyed seeing how essentially what Andy did when he did the rules for Firefight for Mantic was he took all of the best bits from Mantic's games and put them into a rule set. And I've always enjoyed Mantic's rule sets because I find them very easy to pick up. And as soon as I'm playing them, I get the kind of experience, the depth. Dead Zone rules, Walking Dead rules, Kings of War rules, Armada rules, Vanguard rules. I've always found that the core of those is really simple to get into, but the depth is in playing them and kind of like learning. And Firefight just kind of pulled all of the best bits of those things together. And that's why, from a combination of all things told, how much I've played this year, how much I've painted this year, how much I've enjoyed playing this year, and the fact that the game is new this year as well. Firefight has been my game of 2022. And like I say, I'm not sure if it'll be something like next year. There'll be other things take my fancy as well. There'll be other games that I play more of. I've already said I'll be playing a lot more Malifaux next year as well. But it would be wrong of me to put anything else number one this year outside of Firefight. I've been really impressed with it. I think Mantic did a great sort of job of the launch this year, and I really enjoyed doing the slow growth campaign as well. I loved seeing people playing at that celebration day and seeing how much they were enjoying their games, seeing everybody had built their armies up, everybody had painted their armies, and just seeing them all come together to play games. It was just like, it was the final tick in the box for me, is seeing people enjoy it. I hope to go to some events next year. I'm going to try and get to a couple of Firefight events myself. I might even run another one myself because I really enjoyed doing that one. So yes, Firefight, Mantic Games, my game of 2022. So, let's have a little look here. Type 40 Tara said it's Firefight, isn't it? Yes. Hello, Peter Kuman, how you doing? Lord Nova says, wow, Firefight, nice. Camo says, so Firefight beat Kings of War. It beat Kings of War in terms of it's my game of 2023. I've not played a huge amount of Kings of War this year. I have played some. But what pushes Kings of War down a little bit for me is the fact you need a hell of a lot of models to play the game. And for me, that's a bit of a barrier. I'm not a quick painter. I'm a bit of a magpie gamer. I move around between different things. And I have to be in the mood for for a big scale game. And Kings of War means I haven't got lots of different options of armies to play with, if you like. Firefight is different. I've got 3 armies for Firefight because you need a lot less models for them. Moose saying, good choice. Mantic taking 2 out of the top 3. As I mentioned before, mate, Mantic rules just kind of work well for me. I've always enjoyed their rule systems. I like a lot of their models, especially the newer ones, are really, really nice. I'm not as keen on some of the older ones, but then I could say that for a lot of different companies. There are a few companies where I would say that I like pretty much entirely their own range. Their whole range, I would say. Clyde says, more surprised Firefight beat Malifaux, but then it's a shiny new. To be honest, mate, Firefight beat Malifaux because I've played a lot more of it this year. And again, as I said before, I've always been more of a sci-fi gamer, and I've not really found a sci-fi game that's really gelled with me. Like, I quite like Dead Zone, but the problem with Dead Zone is the opposite of what I said about Marvel Crisis Protocol and Malifaux, is that, in my opinion, the tables don't look beautiful. The tables always just look like boxy squares, and they all look very similar, if not different color cubes. And I'm a visual gamer. I like to play the game with my eyes as well. I think the rules for Dead Zone are great. I love the way it works from the movement for the cubes, but I can't get excited about how it looks. The difference with Firefight is you can use any terrain you want, kind of thing, when it comes to sci-fi stuff. You can have a jungle world. You can have like an industrial complex. You can play it on some kind of sort of destroyed kind of cityscape or something like that. I don't get that feeling with Dead Zone. So I've always been looking for that kind of sci-fi game, and it's just that this year Firefight kind of hit me, and I've played a lot of it this year, and I've painted a lot of it this year, which is why it's been my number one game. Let's have a little look here. Peter Kuhlman says he's doing great. Too busy though. Taking ages to get through my kill team set assembly. You need to pick up the pace, mate. Mark says, tell us a bit about the celebration at Mantic. I wish I could have gone. So, mate, what we did was we played 3 games on the day. 750 points was the first game. 750 points was the second game. And the third game was 1,000 points. It started with 750. And then depending upon how your story progressed, depended upon when your 250 points of reserves came on. There was 20 tickets available for the day. And that was limited by the size of Mantic HQ. We could only fit 20 people in. So the tickets went on sale and sold out within an hour. So we sold all 20 tickets in an hour, which I was massively surprised about. But I still had this kind of feeling of I might be the only person there, more if nobody turns up. We had 3 people drop out. A couple of guys couldn't make it because of some family illness. One person couldn't make it because of the train strike. But we still had 17 people turn up on the day. And I basically did the 3 scenarios where there was a bit of a narrative story. So each person who played the first game, there was a mission 1A and a mission 1B, and they had different stories about why they were there sort of fighting their fight. They had the same objective, but there was different reasons why they wanted that objective. And then depending upon whether you won or lost that first game, depended on which way the story went. And then what happened is in the second game, depending upon whether you won or lost, depended on which way the story went. So that I had printed off lots of different narrative options to depend upon what happened with people and to try and then match them up with people whose stories aligned with yours as well. So it was a lot more complicated than I thought it would be, but I managed to make it work. And it's because it wasn't a tournament. There was no prizes. Everybody got a goodie bag for attending. And it was just like a bit of a narrative day with 3 games. Everybody seemed to have a good time. The games all ran to time. People had plenty of time between rounds and stuff like that to have a bit of a break and have a bit of a chat and look at people's armies and have a bit of a browse around the shop as well. For some people, it was the first time they'd been to Mantic HQ, so it was good for them to kind of have a little look around the store and stuff. But it went really well. People seemed to really enjoy it. There was talk about maybe sort of running another event in the future. So, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to kind of be critical of it in terms of like without sort of the things that I would do better the next time. But, yeah, I think it seemed to have a good event. Super Pokemon says it's weird. I have not played any of Andy's top 5 picks. Well, there's your job for 2023, mate. Give him a try, get a demo. VG says not gotten to Firefight yet, but I've really enjoyed Dead Zone this year. Same. Andrew's saying it's the thing with Mantic. I don't play their games, but they have my respect. Yeah, not everybody plays everything, mate. Yeah, that's it. RPD saying go off to check out Firefight. Clyde says those are solid reasons. Yeah. Liam says 1-page rules, Grimdark and Silver Bayonet are both games I'm hoping to get into next year. I'm not against that, like any of those games. I've not played either of those. I'm just not massively into like miniature agnostic games. I find it hard to get opponents, so it's hard to like. They take a lot more prep work because people generally kind of have to want to really get into those games, and then you have to try and find miniatures that work with that game as well. This is another reason why I kind of like I tend to play games where there's a miniatures range, and it's easy for me to just pick stuff up that I like the look of and paint them and play that way. Excuse me. Poking my nose up there. RG says my top 5: Dead Zone, 5 Parsecs from Home, Raven Feast. I've never heard of Raven Feast. Carnivalia and Armada. Do you mean Armada, Mantic's Armada? Or do you mean Fantasy Flight or Atomic Mass Games Armada? Great thing is model crossover from Dead Zone and 5 Parsecs. Yeah, if you have the models, then great. Peter says pick up the pace and maybe I need to start 1 at a time instead of 3 boxes at once. There is that, mate, as well. Yeah. Mini Walmart, good evening, mate. He says, you can have used red solo cups for Firefight. Great beer and pretzel games. Well, kind of think of it. Almost all my miniature war games involve beer and pretzels. You kind of used red solo cups for Firefight. I wouldn't necessarily say Firefight was a beer and pretzel game any more than... It depends how serious you take it, I suppose. John is still saying, for me, I'd say Firefight was my game of 2022. Great game, great minis, and the final day was a great end of the year. I'm glad you enjoyed it, mate, yeah. Snowball says, did you have a look at Turnip 28 this year? It's wild. I didn't, mate. I've never seen Turnip. I'm aware of it, that it exists, but I don't know anything about it. I've never played it. RG saying, yeah, Mantic Armada. Many Warmwood says, for 2023, paint all Warlord games, Greek, Spartan, Saxon, Vikings, and Imperial Roman starter armies. Somebody slap me. Sounds like you got plenty on your plate, mate. So, couple of games that made my honourable mentions list, and didn't make it onto the top 5 for whatever reason. One I've just talked about was Dead Zone. I do like Dead Zone as a game. but I find it hard to get excited about Dead Zone visually, as I mentioned. Like, the terrain's pretty good, but then every time I see a photograph online of a game of Dead Zone, it looks like the same game. And that's the only reason I would say that it didn't really make my top 5. I've played a lot of Dead Zone this year. Like I say, I enjoy the games, but as a hobby kind of experience, it doesn't really scratch the itch for me. So when I'm talking about the overarching kind of like experience this year, yeah, that's why it didn't really break into the top 5. Another one that didn't get into the top 5, but for a different reason, was Blitzball. So I really like Blitzball. VJ and I have played it quite a bit on Tabletop Simulator. We actually played a game face to face while I was here. Now, for somebody that doesn't like Blood Bowl, Blitzball is a very, very different game. And I can see me kind of next year, I think, maybe picking up some extra teams just to paint as little kind of painting projects. You're only painting up kind of like 5 or 6 models or something like that. I can honestly I can see me painting them up as little kind of like little painting projects. The reason it didn't make my top 5 was it's not that easily available. I know there's ways to import it into the UK, so it's not impossible, but it kind of doesn't feel right to have a game that's not easy for people to be able to go and kind of pick up off the shelf. So yeah, so Blitzball didn't make it for that reason, but not because it wasn't a good game, just because kind of it's not easy to go and buy. And the last one, the other one that didn't really make it, is Moonstone. And the reason Moonstone didn't make it is I didn't actually play it this year. I do love Moonstone. As I said in the interview with Tom, a lot of the mechanics absolutely go into my kind of tick list. I love the fact that you don't use dice, you use cards. It's one of the things I love about Malifaux. I love the fact that there's no points for list building. So you just kind of like, you just take the models you like the look of. You essentially agree with your opponent. Are we going to play with 4 models each? Are we going to play with 5 models each? That's kind of how you list build. And everything's kind of balanced in terms of that. You just basically pick up the models you like the look of within a faction. And that's how you kind of do your list building. I love the bluffing mechanic in the game. And I love the way the almost like the rock paper scissors of the melee combat as well. And I think it's really clever about how the Moonstones, or those D4s that you roll and whatever number's shown, is how deep the Moonstone is, and that's how many times you have to dig for it. In a landscape of games which are very much filled with, you roll D6, you have a stat line, you move, you shoot, like it's all about killing. Any game that it doesn't necessarily fit into that always kind of stands out to me as something to look at and go, well, I like that. It's one of the reasons I love Malifaux, is the fact that it's not just about killing each other. You don't use dice. You've got your stats on cards in front of you, all those kind of things. Moonstone fills a lot of those same things. The reason I didn't really play it this year is it's such a kind of underground kind of game, if you like. It's not that easy to kind of to pick up opponents, unfortunately. And unless you have a regular gaming group or you have a regular opponent, it's one of those games that it's not easy to get games of. So I didn't play it this year, but that doesn't mean that I don't love the game. And if I'd played it, it would have been in my top 5 this year. So yeah, so that's kind of what was that was what really was some honourable mentions and why they didn't make it. Let's have a little look here and see what RPDC in his top 4 was Fallout, Wasteland Warfare, 2 Resident Evil, 3 Mansions of Madness, and 4 Dead Zone. Yeah, a couple of board games in there as well, mate. But yeah. Austin Thornhill saying, joined late, sorry if you've already answered this. Any games that you're excited to try for the first time in 2023? I briefly said earlier on that Conquest, there's a lot of buzz about it locally at my local gaming club. The guys there seem to absolutely love it. I've not played it. It's something I want to try it, just so that I can at least have an informed decision whether it's something that interests me or not. But yeah, I definitely want to be trying that. Let's have a little look here. RG saying Raven's Feast is a Viking skirmish game from Little Wars TV. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, mate. Explore Norfolk says, join the club, Mini. Got 60 more Swedish pikemen to paint up and about 100 pikemen for Macedonia. That fills me with dread, that kind of stuff. RG saying, Blitzball's good, just didn't play it in 2022. Yeah. And Vijay saying, yeah, it's a pity it's not available in the UK. I'm just super surprised it's not, mate. I don't know whether they think it's going to take people away from Blood Bowl or what. Like, there's no reason not to, really. Like, all of the components that you need to play are essentially stuff that are like should be available in the UK, really. I mean, you can buy the Dungeon Bowl game, you can buy the Blood Bowl game. It's the only thing you can't buy randomly. Andrew says, top 5 played in the bag then. What about top 5 that you built, paint, and read lore about? That's a different question, mate. So Carnivale, I would say that I really liked the background to it. I did play a demo of it at UK Games Expo. However, the box set I got had a load of broken miniatures in it, and so I never really got round to building them and playing it. Something I might get round to at some point. But Carnivale, I liked the background too. It's something I'll probably might get to in the future. Dystopian Wars is something that I built and painted this year. Never got a game of it in because, again, like a lot of the War Cradle games, they seem to constantly move. They seem to release the game while it's still in some kind of beta testing, and the stats are constantly shifting. Wild West Exodus went through exactly the same problem. So I kind of intentionally took a step back from Dystopian Wars and just left it to kind of settle down before I got to a point where I would give it a try. And so I've not played it yet, but I quite like the background stories to it. Models are nice. I'm not sure if it's a bit more complex than I'm looking for in a kind of like in a miniatures game, but we'll see. Wild West Exodus, I would lump in with that as well. I don't know why, but well, I do know why, because War Cradle have spent their time sort of really pushing Dystopian Wars for the last 12 months. Wild West Exodus seems to be like the forgotten stepchild at the minute. They don't really seem to kind of talk about it. They don't really seem to release anything for it. And I think even the fans of the game, if you look on their Facebook group, seem to be getting a little bit twitchy about it as well. That it's gone a little bit unloved this last year. But I do love the background to it. I'm a big fan of the Wild West Exodus background. Is there anything else that's kind of sprung up? What I would say. I think that those are probably the ones that kind of stand out to me. I'm looking on my shelf now to see if there's anything else that kind of jumps out. No, I would say that's where it is. I've played some nice board games this year, but that doesn't kind of fit in with it with the miniatures game stuff. Clyde saying Pulp Alley's my number one for this year. Love the flexibility. Again, not a game I know much about. Ferrothom says I definitely recommend Conquest. Yeah, there's like I see a lot of love for it locally for me. The only reason I'm not that sure about it is the miniatures don't really. There's nothing really stands out to me as miniatures that I think are anything that I really like. I haven't found a faction that I would want to like spend money on yet. That's the only thing. But I want to try the game to kind of see what I think of it. Just as saying GW should release Blitzball here and re-release Space Hulk. I'd actually buy some of their games then. I've got Space Hulk and I think I've played it once. And I've never played it again. Andrew says, what was that naval game you had earlier in the year? So either Armada, mate, or Dystopian Wars. It'll have been one of those two. Just as saying, I'm glad Conquest has taken off. I like how full-on the makers are about it. They seem to be really building a nice world around it. Like I say, it's more the aesthetic of the miniatures. There's nothing that like is my particular kind of style really. I don't think they're bad quality or anything like that. There's nothing where I go like, because you do have to paint quite a few. There's nothing at the minute where I think I really like that. I want to paint that kind of thing. Mini Warwood says, he's talking about RG Anderson and Mora, yeah. Austin says, I think Blitzball is a game that is exclusively sold by Barnes and Noble. It is exclusively sold by Barnes and Noble, but it's it's not sold at all in the UK. So it's still made by Games Workshop, and Games Workshop made about 3 or 4 kind of smaller boxed games, and the rest of them are all available in the UK. Blitzball is the only one that's not. It's sold in Germany and it's sold in America, and it's not sold anywhere else randomly. Might be sold in. No, I don't know. Might be sold in Australia. I'm not sure or not. I think it's definitely sold in Germany, because you can buy German language versions of it, and that's why I know it's sold in Germany. But they do like some other smaller kind of like they do like a smaller version of Underworlds called, well, the name escapes me now, but they're sold in the UK. You can buy them here. For some reason, that's the only one that you can't. Yeah, Tasty Brain Drain saying Law for Conquest is amazing. I've not read a lot of it, but I do know it's, yeah. Kelly Coyle saying Blitzball's an amazing game if you can get US to buy a copy. Yeah, I was really fortunate. Somebody from the US managed to send me a copy over, which is where I got mine. But yeah, it's not the easiest thing to pick up. And actually, even importing it is really expensive, because there was a board game that again is only available in the US at the minute. So me and my wife quite like doing like sort of escape rooms, and we're really big fans of the Exit board games. And there is a board game called Box One by what's he called? Neil Patrick Harris. So Neil Patrick Harris, Doogie Howser guy from How I Met Your Mother. He's into magic, and he's into escape rooms, and he's into board games and stuff. And he's created a board, like this escape room in a box called Box One, and you can only buy it in the States. And I was thinking I would buy it for my wife for Christmas as a nice kind of surprise. The problem is you can only buy it in the States. And for all the game is on sale for like about $30, it was going to cost me about $60 to import it. So it was going to cost me like about like £90 for this board game that is essentially like a £30 board game. And I was thinking like £90 is a lot of money, like for something that you can only play once, because then you've solved it. So if I was there on holiday, I would pick one up and bring it back with me, kind of thing. But I don't think it's something I wanted to kind of import. They're expensive. Let's have a little look here. Clyde saying that's the exact reason that keeps him from Conquest. About the miniatures, mate, yeah. Super Pokemon says the closest to the top 5 picks I play is Malifaux by helping make Swamp Terrain for a local gaming group. I want to see some pictures of that, mate. Ed saying, Knight, thanks for the stream. Thank you very much, Ed. Oh, wow, it's getting on now, isn't it? Yeah. RG says, it doesn't look how I want it to. Good idea, though. Liam says, I love the smaller Warhammer Quest Barnes and Nobles. Yeah, they sell them like in game stores here in the UK as well. So there's some of those games that are exclusive to kind of game in the UK, but they are available. I just don't know why Blitzball is one of those ones that doesn't sell here. And Tizzy Brain says, I kind of get what you're saying about the look of Conquest, because while I have found 3 factions that I like the look of, the faction that I like the most, I'll not play because I hate how they look. Yeah, it's not that I hate them or anything like that. There's just nothing that really stands out to me where I think, oh, like I would love to paint that. That looks really cool. There's the odd model, but not like if it was a skirmish game, it'd be a bit different. I'm only painting like 5 or 10 models or something. But when you're talking about big army scale games, it's a bit different. You've kind of really want to get involved in it. Anyway, I think that is as good a place as any to kind of round off the stream for tonight. Thank you everybody that's come in tonight. Really do appreciate it. We'll be back again next Monday for the live stream as well. And is it the last one before Christmas? Is the one after that Boxing Day, I think? Let's have a little look in my diary here. Yeah, it is the 19th next Monday. So it'll be the last stream before Christmas. So we'll have a little bit of a Christmas stream, I think. We might talk a little bit more about kind of into 2023 and what we're looking forward to. But yeah, we'll do that next week. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here. There'll be more videos coming this week. I'm halfway through recording a couple of things at the moment, so hopefully I'll get them finished off and get those out this week. If you haven't checked out my Moonstone interview with Tom Greenway, please do check it out. And otherwise, take care, everybody, and I'll see you next time.